represent the landowners as I did last month. I gave the revision package that you have to the neighbors today. It's been my understanding that Chris has tried on several occasions to discuss this with Mr. Rayner too, and has not really gotten anywhere, so I wasn't sure if Mr. Rayner's sister and brother-in-law had gotten a copy, so that's why I gave them a copy. A couple of things, as you see on the plan, we've added a list of conditions that would be done regardless of which alternative were chosen. Not the least of which is the length of match play, the length of the season, and also the initial latrine servicing schedule. If it turns out that it needs to be different once it's being used, then obviously it will be revised. And again, as Angela said, we have 4 alternative plans, which are in various combinations to what we heard the planning board at the last meeting. And also we can go through each of those if you want to, if you can tell us there's ones you don't like or do like. But we could also do alternative number 5, which could be a combination of any of the 4 or something brand new. We're open to discuss. Alternative 1 is probably the least different from the original case. It does specify a berm. It also specifies that the silo is not going to be disturbed. It's not going to have a sign put on it, and we're just going to clean up the plant material at the base of it. And also that the parking, if the parking area was there, it would not be directly in front of the Smith house. It would be down further from past the house. And then it also shows the oval second field component that it would be used as a practice field. That would be alternative number 1. And one of those, and the things that addressed are having a parking area that did not have any kind of buffering between the neighbor's house and what we're doing, and then also trying to minimize the amount of grading. So we made the second field shorter, and we were more precise about how far away the latrines would be and what their schedule was. Alternative 2. Alternative 2 is using a new easement on Hillside Dairy Road, which you have a copy of the letter of understanding of that easement among all the landowners that is signed. Those landowners represent 7 adjoining pieces of property to our site. So all 7 of those landowners, there are 4 landowners, all 7 of those properties are in favor of our case. The difference being is what we're trying to do is we're trying to, as we always were, we're trying to minimize some of the environmental impact on the creek. So what we wanted to do is to keep the 2 fields on the west side, so we did not have to go across the creek to get from parking lot to the fields. So what we have is an agreement to improve the farm road that is on Hillside Dairy Farm now to a parking lot that is behind the Gaines's property outside of where the existing trees are, with the latrines in the 2 fields. If in the future there's going to be a practice field, it would be on the eastern side of the creek and have its own independent parking lot latrine. Again, what that does is that allows the development without having to cross the creek in any way, shape, or form. Again, promises of cleaning up and keeping the silo, cleaning up the trees, don't take down anything unless it's diseased or is dying or a danger to the public health, safety, and welfare. And as far as the easement goes, we're asking for, if we do any of these, that the easement be allowed for maintenance of the property. But what I mean about maintenance is there is, in the silo area, there is a pretty good band of trees. So it is physically divided from the trees south and the trees north to the fields. What we want to be able to do is basically maintain anything on the south side of the fields using that easement. Player use or visitor use of that easement would not be allowed under any circumstances. It's just for maintenance of that end of the field. Yes, ma'am.
How are you going to control that?
We can control it because we are a small ownership, and they have rules and regulations they can put out to any player that is coming or
But
sits
if you Google an address or something and it sends you down 64 and the shortest way to get there is up that easement.
the owners of the properties would directly have contact and information with any players coming to the field. They would know they would have to come off of Hillside Dairy.
They'll have to get an address off Hillside area.
Yes, we can do that.
And no parking there, so there won't be any parking on that side, so they have to come on the side.
Well, it wouldn't prevent them from driving down the road and then realizing that after they've already driven.
Let Mr. Walker finish his presentation.
Okay, I can answer his
Yeah,
question.
Yeah, can we, yeah.
Question on your alternative two, there's an area in the south that's indicated as area for grass
I'm
parking.
sorry, that was from the old graphic. That should have been removed. That's my fault for having that on there. I apologize. Yes, sir.
Under alternate two and the other plans with the parking lot in the northeast corner,
Yes.
players would just cross the creek on like a footpath to get to the fields?
If there is, in alternative two, there would be no reason to cross the creek, because if you're on alternative two on the practice field, you'd stay on the east side of the creek. If you're playing, you'd go to the west side of the creek on its independent parking area, so there'd be no reason to cross.
Yeah, 'cause you can come in this way.
So you're not moving.
Correct, we would not. If alternate two was chosen, we would not provide any kind of crossing across the creek.
Well,
And besides, if, on that, we discovered it as we walked it, the tree line that's on that's on the east side that's defined that tree line, it still has a very effective barbed wire fence running down the entire tree line.
very effective. Well, at least personally, I'm more concerned that your neighbors understand what might be happening and that they're happy with one of the alternatives rather than us making a decision which alternate we like.
We're gonna hear from the neighbors in a moment, some of the neighbors.
I can't speak for the neighbors that are here, but the neighbors that we obtained the easements from, that we spoke to, all were in favor of the case.
Let's touch on alternate three. Yeah, can we go through the alternates first and then come back to questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Alternative three, that has the parking lot on the east side, and then we would have to cross the creek. We would not do any kind of vehicular crossing. We would do a pedestrian crossing. But given the topography in that area, it is very low in that area, so it would either be a footbridge over the creek, or it would be a series of pipes that allow the creek to drain through, and then it would go over with some kind of material such as a mulch or a pea gravel. Again, we were trying to avoid the impact of the creek. There's a lot of low area in that place, and drainage is going to be an issue, and we were trying to avoid that under all circumstances.
So is the grass parking on this plan in error as well?
Yes, I'm sorry, it is. In general, that is my fault. I should not have left that on there. Now, alternative four is, instead of splitting up two on Hillside and, with two parking lots on Hillside, there's one on Hillside and one using the 64, one we use the 64 easement, which would then cut the potential traffic in half. So we have everything from maintenance only to cut in half, and to cut the traffic in half and have no player use on that area. So we have three alternatives. Because we understand that the use of those easements were a bone of contention. So what we try to do is come up with different ways to treat all that easement under at least four circumstances.
For the actual construction of the fields, the traffic will be flowing up and down that easement off of 64, correct?
During the construction, no, it would be coming from Hillside Dairy. Because the line of trees near the silo, that effectively cuts the north and the south offset. It would have to be coming from Hillside Dairy to build the fields.
So it'll be taking materials for the fields across the creek without equipment, or?
No, our intention would be to balance the grading on the west side, that all the earth moving on one side is going to self-balance. That's up to us to do. We don't want to bring dirt in, we don't want to take dirt off. We don't want to cross the creek, we don't want to go down the easement with the dirt.
And on the, you have, on the end of this, you have the neighbors and so forth. I looked in the tax maps and, the property just to the east is owned by,
Chris, have you talked to them?
Bogapu and,
They're a couple out of Florida. I have not spoken to them.
I don't think there's a house on, it's showing a house on there.
Yeah, there's no house, it's an open field.
Yeah, it's just a California.
Okay.
It's right there, yes. But the Brooks family owns five tracks that surround this property, and they are in favor of this, and then the Gaines family owns the two properties that are directly to
Right,
us.
I see, I can see those.
Yes.
Those two in the Brooks, I can see that, that's just to the west of where you're.
And they're also
alternate
across the
two
street, they own the
ingress is.
three
Right.
tracks across the
But
street.
I'm wondering about that one, with the long property line, it's, the two people with the last names were Bogapoo and Naluri.
We're not purporting to do any construction on those tracks. We just have, we've sent letters to them, we've gotten no comments from them at all.
Is
Either.
that one that you have checked off here? Did you check that one off?
Yeah, we basically tried to, letters, that's the only thing, we couldn't get I tried to reach them, but there's no way.
That's not a green
Okay, so
check.
we should
So
take that off.
then you should not have checked.
We should not have those on
You
there.
should not have checked that,
But the
but there is a
Gaines-
substantial border there, and one of your alternate two has a future practice area that is right up against the border of their property.
We have tried on at least 4 occasions to get to them, and they have not responded to us at all, either in writing or by phone.
Any other questions from Mr. Walker?
On this, alternate to the practice area,
Yes, ma'am.
it says existing lawn. Does that mean you're not going to do any grading there? Is
The
that
only thing
just-
we'd have to do is, it's a practice field, it's really just an open field, so we just cut the grass there. Yes, that would not have to be graded to a regulatory field.
And how large would the parking area for that be?
I would say it would probably park less than a dozen cars, because it's a practice field. Yes, sir.
On this alternate 3, what is this here in the dotted line, so to speak?
The dotted line is if, in alternate 3, all of the parking is on the east side at Hillside Dairy, and the dotted line is the pedestrian crossing we'd have to make to get from there to get parking to the fields. Yes, ma'am.
I noticed in alternate 4 where you have the parking off of the 64 easement. In alternate 1, you had included a hedge, but there's no hedge here.
We can include a hedge if that was one of the, if that's one of the
I
details
would
that you
think
want.
that
Well,
might be
that's-
important to the.
That's the one,
property.
that's the one where we're cutting the traffic in half, but we can put, but any buffering that we would purport to do on that parking, we'll do on any alternative.
You'd still need a type A opaque buffer.
Right, right.
And that's 5 East Land, eastern side, that's bought by one of the sponsors for the team as well, the TCL team. He's not closed the property yet. Once he closes that in, I think May, he's willing to support that easement, which is going from 64 as well. just to get it there.
Thank you. Any other questions before we go to the next speaker?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
somebody mentioned that there were 7 in favor of the.
There are 3 landowners that represent the 7 tracts of land around us. There is one family that owns more than one tract of land.
And 2 of those on the other side of Hillside Dairy Road.
3.
3 are on the other side of Hillside.
There's three on the other side of Hillside Dairy. The large one that's to the west of us are all owned by the Brooks family. Then the two smaller properties immediately to the north are owned to us by the Gaines family, and both of them own total.
Chris, could you repeat again what you said about purchasing another property?
Which is 5 East Land on the 64 on the left side. Yeah, that one. That's been bought by one of the TCL sponsors. He's a very big supporter of the cricket. He's closing that next month, and he's willing to support that easement.
If we need it.
Needed.
That would be 2/3 of the easement holders.
And that's for alternative 2, is that correct?
Yeah, and the 2 are maintenance or.
Okay,
It would actually be all of them, because it would be at the very least maintenance.
gotcha.
I have a question about alternate 2, in terms of driveway access for 2 parking areas, or, for the easement on the west side would be parking, and the other eastern parking. Would that be a problem, driveway access, like that close together? I don't know what the distance
those two driveways far exceed DOT's requirements for separation.
You mean the Spivey driveway plus the other?
On Hillside.
Dairy.
Well, you'll have the one, there's the one existing driveway that we're looking to improve on Hillside Dairy. And then the Gaines, the second Gaines family have one, and then there's all the frontage that we have on ours.
George, here's the, so here's the access point off to the side there, and it just comes down this,
Yeah,
this is what they were showing on the plan, just kind of runs down and goes into their property here.
right.
That's the legal easement would be running from there to here.
Thank you.
So would you leave those trees?
Yes,
there,
ma'am.
At the north there, right there at the boundary line?
Yes, ma'am, if you,
Isn't it
that's the reason why, in the easement agreement, we specify a 600-foot depth, because that gets us past that and then allow parking. Yes, we
So
would
the
not,
parking would be.
behind those trees, yes.
behind the
From the
trees.
Gaines perspective, it would be behind the trees, yes.
And how wide is that area? with the
About
trees
75
up?
feet.
75. So on, alternate, let's see, I think it was one, and one of the other alternates, yeah, I think three, it's showing field two as being more of an oval. Yet on this alternate two, it's back to that big round. And, you know, last month I had concerns about the amount of grading that it would take to get that second field to work. Why is that round there and more oval than the other?
Those are, again, part of the alternatives, that the oval would be built for, would be allowed to be used for practice fields, but if we put the practice field on the right-hand side, we have room for two full-size fields. If we don't, if the board still feels like they don't want to have two full-size regulation fields on one side, then that will be one of the alternatives we use.
Yeah, because alternative one does, you know, just has the two fields, one being the round one and one being the oval one, and it doesn't show anything on the east side. So I like that configuration on, you know, to be on alternate two. I'm not that crazy about the practice area on the east side. Sounds like it'll be pretty low impact, but since we haven't heard from that neighbor, and, you know, that might be something that would really impact, you know, their property.
And again, that's why we had said before, if there's something in an alternative that we have not combined correctly, we can pick and choose.
The idea is to use the open area right there. We're not going to cut any trees, just put some nets for the practice. That's the thinking.
Again, that doesn't have to be graded, that doesn't have to be graded to a regulation grade. It's just an open field that they can use. So it's an open field today, it'll be an open field later.
Well, so the future practice area you say would not need to be graded?
No, it would not.
Okay, 'cause I was trying to figure out what the EIA requirements, once you hit 10 acres of disturbance
Right.
threshold.
We're not, that does not need to be graded to any kind of level, professional level or accepted level. That would just be an open field that you could warm up in or whatever.
At the bottom of the last page, what is that statement about 10 acres of one family or something?
That's the one is-
You all selling some of the property?
No, that was a request. It's my understanding, and Chris had spoken to him, he can speak to that, that was a request that Mr. Rayner had made to Chris.
We were trying to talk to the neighbors to see if there's a way we can compromise, come to an understanding. Marty suggested if we can, you know, sell him the 10 acres, you know, he may think about agreeing to the proposal.
I
As
see.
the proposal came.
10 acres on the southern side,
Yes, sir.
so I guess so they can have a buffer.
I don't think that's something we can,
That's nothing we do.
right. That's not part of any recommendation we would make. Any further questions?
The Spivey property, is that intended to be combined
No,
with this?
it just happens to be a landowner that found out about Mrs. Spivey's property through this process. That's the coincidence.
But has that sale closed?
I think it's
It's
next month.
happening May sometime, yeah.
I think it's in-
So it's not closed?
Hasn't
Not
closed
closed.
yet, no.
Okay.
So regardless, either
That's
it's
why we
the
don't
new
have
owner.
any letter or anything from him. He's just agreed to it, so once it comes through, he'll support it, but I mean, as of now, we don't have anything right.
Okay.
The new
So-
owner
so
is in
it's not-
favor,
We
the
can't
current
really,
owner,
yeah.
Yeah.
the current owner is in favor, the new owner will be in favor. So if you need to focus on Ms. Spivey, then she is in favor of the plan.
Do you have anything in writing, and all these people are in favor of things, is anything in writing or letter from them? or
Well,
anything?
the easement letter that you have a copy of was signed by the Gaines and the Brooks family. So that is their agreement to what we're doing. And Ms. Spivey showed up at the joint public hearing and voiced her support of the case.